Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi shir.
Shalom and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, Brachos, Daf Lamed Zayin. We're on Lamed Vav Amud Beis. 3 lines from the bottom, says the Gemara Gufa, we learned the halacha. Rav Shmuel, the Amr Tavayu, Rav and Shmuel both taught us that the chameshes minei dagan, the 5 grains, wheat, barley, spelt, rye, oat, are so significant, are so chashiv, that kol sheyesh boi mechameshes aminim, any dish, a dish that's made of other ingredients, and it contains merely a minute amount of one of these 5 grains, mevorchen olav b'rei minim mezonos. The proper bracha is b'rei minim mezonos. Hashem creates the species of sustenance, even though the 5 grains are only found in this dish in a very small amount. Nevertheless, they're so chashav and significant, they overtake the entire food, and it assumes the bracha of the grains, which is b'rei minim mezonos. Tosfos points out, this is only said when the grains are found in this dish, are there for the purpose of Su'uda, to be soyed halev, for satiation purposes, to satisfy, to fill. But if they're merely serving as a binding agent, the dabik ba'alma, then they're not significant, they're not chashiv, and they are nullified, they are batal, and we do not make a b'rei minim mezonos if they're only there in a small amount. Continues the Gemara, v'itmer nami, we found another halacha. Rav Shmuel, the Amr Tavayu, Rav Shmuel both taught us the following din. Kol shehu mechameshes aminim, when there's a food which is made up of these 5 grains, the proper bracha is b'rei minim mezonos. It appears that this is a duplicate statement. Why is it necessary for them to teach us the same halacha twice? Says the Gemara Tzricha. We need both of them. Diashminan kol shehu. If they would only teach us the halacha that kol shehu mechameshes aminim, I would say mishum de'isei be'enei, because the grains are there in its pure form. They're not mixed into anything else. When we have something which is made up of one of these 5 grains, the bracha is mezonos. Aval, but in the case of alidei taroivus, if they're mixed into something else, they're there in a mixture, they're only a small element within a larger dish, I would say lie. The bracha is not b'rei minim mezonos. Kamash malon, that's why Rabbi Shmuel teaches us, kol sheyesh boi, if there is any amount of the chamesh aminim within the dish, if the dish contains even a small element of the 5 grains, we make it mezonos. V'yashmin kol sheyesh boi, if they would only teach us that halacha, I would say havamina, I would think kol sheyesh boi chamesh aminim in. If a dish contains any amount of the chamesh aminim, we require mezonos. Aval oirez v'doichan loy, but oirez or doichan, Rashi says oirez is millet. Tosfos interprets oirez to mean rice and doichan as millet, and that is the more prevalent pirush in the mefarshim. So I would say that oirez v'doichan are not significant enough. They're not considered to be on the same level, a grain, as the 5 minei dagan. Therefore, if they're mixed into a taroivus, in that case, the taroivus doesn't assume the bracha of the oirez v'doichan. Only regarding the chameshes minei dagan that are mixed into a larger dish do we say that it assumes the halacha of the grains, of the chameshes minei dagan, since they are chashiv. But oirez v'doichan that are mixed in, we do not apply that halacha. However, that is only mishum dal taroivus, because we're dealing with a mixture. Aval isei be'enei, but pure oirez v'doichan, in their pure form, not mixed in with anything else. Neima, perhaps I would say, I feel oirez v'doichan nami. Even oirez v'doichan require a b'rei minim mezonos, mevorchen ala b'rei minim mezonos. Kamash malon, that's why Rabbi Shmuel teaches the other halacha. Kol shehu mechameshes aminim, a dish, a food which is made up of the chamesh aminim, hu de mevorchen ala b'rei minim mezonos, that requires the bracha of mezonos. Allah afuke, to exclude oirez v'doichan, a food made of oirez or doichan, even if it's in its pure form, not mixed in with anything else. We do not make the bracha of b'rei minim mezonos, since oirez v'doichan are not considered to be a status of grain in the same level as the chameshes minei dagan. So in conclusion, Rabbi Shmuel teaches 2 things. Firstly, that only the chameshes minei dagan require a bracha of b'rei minim mezonos. Number 2, even if they're mixed into a mixture, the mixture contains even a small amount of these 5 grains. Nevertheless, since these chameshes minei dagan are so chashav and so significant, it overtakes the entire mixture, and the proper bracha to be said is b'rei minim mezonos. Continues the Gemara. How could you say that regarding Oiras V'doichen there's no bracha of Mezonos? V'atani, we have a brisa that teaches us otherwise. V'atani, Hivilu fun of Paz Oiras Upaz Doichan. If they bring in front of him bread made of rice, bread made of doichan, of millet, mevarchen of tchila v'soif, he makes a bracha before and after. What type of bracha does he make? A bracha similar to the bracha that one makes on a maaseh kedera, grains that were cooked in a pot, meaning a porridge made of grains, like an oatmeal and the likes of. So we know that the halacha of oiras is equated to maaseh kedera. Now, what bracha does one make on a maaseh kedera? V'gabe maaseh kedera tani, we learned, but chila mevarach ala very min mezonos. Before one eats a maaseh kedera, what bracha does he make? A mezonos. Ulbasayif, afterwards mevarach ala bracha achas mein shalish. We make a bracha, one which is a bridge from three, which is the alamichi that we make today. So apparently, oiras has the same status as grains. We make a mezonos beforehand and an alamicha afterwards. So this is in contradiction to Rav Shmuel. Says the Gemara, no. K'maaseh kedera v'lo k'maaseh kedera. We equate it somewhat to maaseh kedera, but not entirely. In what way do we equate it to maaseh kedera? K'maaseh kedera d'mevarchen alav tchila v'soif. It is equivalent, it is compared to maaseh kedera that, just like maaseh kedera gets a mezonos before and alamichi afterwards, it doesn't receive the same bracha as bread. There's no hamaitzi, there's no brachas hamazon. Similarly, regarding oiras, we make a bracha tchila v'soif in a similar fashion, meaning it does not have a bracha that is recited on bread, hamaitzi, and brachas hamazon. However, we don't equate it to maaseh kedera entirely. V'lo k'maaseh kedera, dilu b'maaseh kedera, regarding a porridge made of grain, but tchila m'varer min mezonos. Prior to eating, we make a mezonos. U'v'asayif bracha achas mein shalish. After the maaseh kedera, one recites the bracha achas mein shalish, meaning the alamichya, which is one bracha, which is an abridgment of the three brachas of brachas hamazon. That's why it's called bracha achas mein shalish. So that's halacha regarding a maaseh kedera made of real grain of the chamesh minei dagan. However, be'ilu hacha, over here by rice, betchila mevarach alav shahakol near bedvarei, we make a general bracha of shahakol. U'basayif, we merely make a bracha of boirei nefashos rabbis v'chasroinan. Hashem created the life, the nefashos, the souls, v'chasroinan, and their deficiencies, meaning whatever is required is essential for their existence. Al kol mashabarasa, everything else that we've added to that. Explains Tosfos, it's referring to extras, things that aren't essential for our existence, aren't our fundamental sustenance, like bread and water. Hashem created a lot of extras to provide us with hana, with pleasure, fruits, vegetables, all kinds of other things. And that is al kol mashabarasa, everything you have added and created for our enjoyment and pleasure. So this is the proper bracha on oiras. A shahakol before and a bar nefashos following. So again, this is the shita of Rav Shmuel, that oiras v'doichen don't assume the same status as the chamishos minei dagan. The chamishos minei dagan require a bracha bar minei mezonos, and followed by a alamichya, if it's a porridge, if it's a cereal. By oiras, it is merely a shahakol before and a bar nefashos following. Says the Gemara, but oiras lav maaseh kedera. How can you suggest that oiras has a different halacha than an ordinary maaseh kedera, than a porridge made of grains? V'hatanya, haven't we learned in the brisa otherwise? Eilu hein maaseh kedera. These following descriptions of a maaseh kedera. Chilka, Rashi says this is wheat that was crushed into two parts. Chadal atarti, into two halves. Targis, that was crushed into three parts. Soilis, Zoris means it's crushed into four, Va'arsan into five. So the different various forms of grain that were crushed into various little pieces. The oiras as well, rice as well, is put into the same category as maaseh kedera. So we see that oiras does require the same bracha as grain. Says the Gemara, Hamani, Rabbi Yechim Nuri. You're right. There is a shita that holds that oiras indeed has the same status as the chameshos minei dagan, and that is the shita, the opinion of Rabbi Yechim Nuri. Rav Shmuel, however, found the shita of the Rabbanon, that we don't equate oiras to grains. Says the Gemara, what do we find Rabbi Yechim Nuri? The sign as we learned. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Omer, Oiris min daganu. It is one of the species of grains. V'chayav and al-chumutei kares. If it leavens, it becomes chametz. One eats it on Pesach, he's chayav, just like any other grains. If one were to eat matzah made of rice, he fulfilled his obligation. It's considered to be a lechem, like a grain. Aval Rabbanan loy. This is the shita of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. But the Rabbanan disagree. They hold that something made of rice is not equated with something made of the 5 types of grains, and there's no chiyuv on chametz. He can't be yotzei dechavasai of matzah made of oires. And Rav Shmuel followed the opinion of the Rabbanan. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan loy. Is that so that the Rabbanan hold that oires doesn't have the same status as the 5 grains? But Tanya, haven't we learned the Brisa that says as follows: Ha'koisis etzachita, one who choose raw wheat, mevarach aleh bar priyadama, the proper bracha is bar priyadama. Tachna, he grinds it. Afa, he bakes it. Bishla, he cooked it. He cooked the baked bread. So what is the halacha now? When it is bread, we make a hamaitzi. He benches on it. What if he goes and he cooks the bread? Says the Brisa, depends. When the pieces of bread are still intact, explains Tosfos, what does this mean? When you grab a hold of it, it doesn't disintegrate, it remains firm, it doesn't fall apart. Then in that case, it still has a status of lechem, of bread, and it receives the same bracha as bread. But chilim mevarach alav b'mitzvah lechem haaretz. What about saif afterwards? Mevarach alav gimel bracha, that is the standard brachas hamazon. However, if it dissolves to the point im ein haprusis kayamis, if the pieces are not intact, then it gets lower to level, it gets bumped down. Now, it's not considered to be in the same level as ordinary bread, but rather, betchila mevarach alav b'mitzvah, we make a mezainis or basayif, and after he eats these pieces of bread that were cooked, he makes a bracha achas mein shalosh, basayif mevarach alav bracha achas mein shalosh. He makes merely ala michya. It's like the Maseh Kedera mentioned earlier. Continues the Brisa. Hakoises is oiris, one who chews rice, raw rice, and mevarach alav bar piadama. Tachnoi, if he grinds it, afa, he baked it, bashla, he cooked it. Afa pisha pruses kayamois, even if the pieces are still intact. He makes a mezainis, and following, we make a bracha achas men shalosh, which is ala michya. So, bread made of oiris, of rice, doesn't have the same halacha as ordinary bread made from the chamesh min dagan. The Brisa teaches us that oiris is pushed down a level. There's a mezainis beforehand, there's an ala michya following. Now let's explore this Brisa. Mani, which opinion, who's the author of this Brisa, which tells us that oiris receives a mezainis and an ala michya, and not just a shahakal and a bar nefashes? Ilim Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, is this the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri? Is he the author of this Brisa? The Omar, oiris min daganu. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, oiris is considered to be one of the types, one of the species of grains. It is equated with all the other grains. If so, how might you lechem in haaretz? Shalish bracha is very bruchi. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, rice is a grain like all other grains. We require a hamaitzi beforehand, and the shalish bracha is brachas hamazon following. So apparently, this Brisa tells us that oiris requires a mezainis, and halamichya is not Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, but rather elalav Rabbanan. You must say the author of this Brisa is the Rabbanan. So we see that even the Rabbanan hold that on oiris we don't merely recite a shahakal with a bar nefashos, but rather a mezainos and an ala michya. V'tiyufta, the Rav Shmuel tiyufta. This is a refutation on Rav Shmuel, who told us that for oiris one merely recites a shahakal and a bar nefashos. This Brisa clearly tells us that according to the Rabbanan as well, oiris assumes a higher status. It is not like ordinary grains, but nevertheless, we make a mezainis and an ala michya. So this is a refutation on the sheet of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel taught us two things. They taught us that on oiris v'doichem we merely make a shahakal and a bar nefashos. We see here that is not so. Now regarding the other halacha of Rabbi Shmuel, that wasn't refuted, as the place can teach us that the other halacha which tells us that when a dish contains even a small amount of the grains of the chamesh min dagan, we still recite, we make a mezainis on the entire mixture. That halacha of Rabbi Shmuel remains intact, and the halacha follows according to that opinion. that when we have a dish which has a small amount of the chamesh mina dagan, we make a mezainis. So that halacha was not refuted. It is only the second din, the din that oiris requires merely a shahakal and a bar nefashes. We see here clearly that even the Rabbanan hold that it requires a mezainis and al hamichid. So we have two shittas. We have a Birchim Menuri who tell us that oiris is like a grain like any other, which means we make a hamoitzi and birchas hamazain following. We have the Rabbanan who teach us that oiris is not like a grain like any other, but nevertheless it requires a mezainis beforehand and al hamichid following. Omar Mar, we learned the halacha beforehand. Hakoises sachita, want to choose raw wheat. Mevarach alebar pri adama, he recites a hadama. V'atanya, haven't we learned? Boyer min Ezraim, that when one choose wheat kernels, he makes a bracha of boyer min Ezraim. Hashem creates different species of seeds. Like kasha, it is not a kasha, it's not difficult. That brisa is following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who tells us that one needs to be specific in his brachas. As Rashi explains, even when we're dealing with a category of things that grow from the ground, nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda says each subcategory requires its own specific bracha. On zraim, on seeds, one makes a bari minei zraim. On other vegetables, one makes a bari minei d'shaim. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, on a kaises esachita, one who choose wheat, he will recite bari minei zraim. Says the Gemara again, like kasha, it's not difficult. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbanan. The shita that says bari minei zraim, that is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. However, the brisa tells us that he recites a bari pri adama on wheat at the Rabbanan, who generalize, who say anything that emanates from the ground, anything that is ground produced, receives a hadama. This is not as we learned in our Mishnah. This is the Mishnah in the beginning of Al Perik. On greens, he makes a bari pri adama regardless if it's seeds, if it's herbage, if it's fruit growing out of the ground. On greens, one recites bari minei d'shaim. Hashem created this species of herbage. And regarding seeds, like chitim, kernels, or beans, in that case, according to Rabbi Yehuda, one must be more specific. And the bracha is bari minei zraim. Continues the Gemara regarding the halacha of rice. Omar Mar, we learned hakoises is oiris. One who chews on rice, mevarach alav bari pri adam. Tachnai, grinds it. Afai, he bakes it. Oh, bashlai, he goes and he cooks it. He cooks the oiris bread, the rice bread. Afal bisha prusis kayomis. Even if the pieces are still intact, what is the proper bracha? But chila mevarach alav bari min mezainis. He makes the mezainis beforehand. Ubasaif, after he completes eating it. Bracha achas mein shalish, he makes al hamichya, which is a bracha mein shalish. Says the Gemara, okay, but va'atanya, we have a brisa that tells us otherwise. Levasaif v'lei klum, when he's finished eating this iris, v'lei klum, he makes no bracha. As Rashi explained, it doesn't mean no bracha at all. It means none of these specific brachas which were designed for the peros that Eretz Yisrael was praised with them, meaning the Shiva Saminim. He doesn't make a al hamichya, he doesn't make Birchas Hamazain, but rather a simple bracha of Bar Nefashes Rabbis. So the Brisa tells us that after following Eirez, he doesn't make Al Hamichya, but rather a Bar Nefashes. This is a contradiction. So how do we resolve this stira? Of Rav Sheshes like Kash, it's not difficult. There are two separate shittas. Ha-Rabba Gamliel v'ha-Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, one recites a Bar Nefashes. Before the iris, he makes a bari minei mezainis. After he finishes the rice, he makes merely a bari nefashes rabbis. However, we have a shita of Rav Gamliel. The Rav Gamliel holds that, generally speaking, after any of the Shiva Saminim, if one eats any of the 7 species, Asher bar nishtabcher Yisrael, that Yisrael is praised by these species, any of the Shiva Saminim, Chita, Sa'ira, Geffen, etc., he doesn't make a bracha hachas men shalish like we do today. Rav Gamliel holds a very unique shita. One is required to make a birchas hamazain, a full-fledged birchas hamazain, shalish brachas, and any of the shiva saminim. He eats a fig, he eats a date, he eats oatmeal, birchas hamazain. Says Rav Sheshes, if so, we understand that according to Rav Sheshes, the shiva saminim require a full-fledged birchas hamazain. Therefore, oirez, which is one step lower, it is one step down in significance of the rest of the grains. Therefore, according to Rav Gamliel, we don't recite a full-fledged Birchas Hamazon on Oiris, but rather a Bracha Achas Mein Shalosh Ala Mechia. So that explains the discrepancy between two brises. One brise which tells us that before to make a Mazonis, and after the Oiris we make a Bar Nefashis, that is Shittas Rabbanon. According to Rabbi Gamliel, before to make a Mazonis, but following the Oiris, one recites the Bracha Achas Mein Shalosh, which is one step lower than Birchas Hamazon. Again, Omar Sheshes, like Kasha, it's not difficult. We have one brise which tells us Bar Nefashis after Oiris. We have one brise that tells us after Oiris is Bracha Achas Mein Shalosh. Rabbi Gamliel, the Shita of Rabbi Gamliel, he is the one that says Bracha Achas Mein Shalosh because he holds that any of the Shivas Aminim require Birchas Hamazon. Oiris is one step lower; it only requires Bracha Achas Mein Shalosh. Rabbanon, however, the Shittas Rabbanon that after Shivas Haminim one makes a Bracha Achas Mein Shalosh. Therefore, Oiris, which is one step lower than ordinary grain, that merely requires a Borei Nefashis. So, at this point of the Gemara, we seem to have four Shittas regarding Oiris. Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri holds Oiris is equated with ordinary grains. Before one eats Oiris, it was Hamaitzi. Afterwards, Birchas Hamazon. According to Rabbi Gamliel, beforehand we make a Mazonis. Afterwards, a Bracha Achas Mein Shalosh Ala Mechia. According to Rabbanon, beforehand the Mazonis. Afterwards, a Bar Nefashis. And finally, according to Rav Shmuel, beforehand merely a Shahakal. And after the Oiris, a Bar Nefashis. So where do we find this Shita of Rabbi Gamliel? The Gemara will explain. The Sanya, as we learned, Zakal, this is a general rule. Kol Shul Mishivas Haminim, anything that's of the Shivas Haminim, Rabbi Gamliel Omer Shalosh Brachos, one recites following eating the Shivas Haminim 3 full brachos, Birchas Hamazon. V'chacham Ma'amrim no Bracha Achas Mein Shalosh. We make a one abridged bracha like we do today, Ala Mechia, or Ala Eitz, or Ala Gefen. U'Maisa Rabbi Gamliel Baskenim, there was a story of Rabbi Gamliel and the other elders, Sheimesum Ba'aliyah, they were reclining on the upper floor. Bi'erichai, v'yaviu lefneihem kaisaves. They served them dates, v'achlu, and they ate. When they completed eating, v'nasan Gamliel rishus, the Rabbi Akiva levarach. He presented Rabbi Akiva with the opportunity to make the bracha achroina, kafat tzibirch. He rushed and he benched and he made the bracha. What type of bracha did he make? Birch Rabbi Akiva bracha achas mein shalish. So Rabbi Gamliel thought that Rabbi Akiva would follow in accordance with Rabbi Gamliel's shita, that he requires a shalish bracha, it's a Birchas Hamazon. Rabbi Akiva nevertheless did his own thing. He made the bracha achas mein shalish. Oh, Rabbi Gamliel was surprised and he said, Akiva, ad masay atamachnis roishcha ben machlekes. Why are you inserting yourself in between this dispute between myself and the Chachamim? Why are you doing like the Chachamim? Amarle, so Rabbi Akiva responded, Rabbeinu, my master, my teacher, even though you, who I respect very much, hold that the proper bracha after Shivas Haminim, after dates that we ate, is really Birchas Hamazon, and your colleagues hold it is a bracha achas mein shalish. Didn't you want to teach us, Limatanu Rabbeinu, that the proper conduct in such a situation is Yachid v'Rabbim, Malacha K'Rabbim? When there's a Yachid individual who is in dispute with a majority, we follow the Rabbim. Therefore, I was obliged to follow the ruling of the Rabbim and recite a bracha achas mein shalish. Continues the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmai. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Gamliel, what is the rule? What is the parameters according to Rabbi Gamliel? Kol shum shivas haminim. Anything that is of the shivas haminim, v'lav min dagan, it's not a grain, it's a date, it's a fig, or min dagan, it's a grain, but it's a pas. It's not bread, it's not formed into bread, it's a porridge, it's an oatmeal. According to Rabbi Gamliel, either way, Rabbi Gamliel omer shalish brachos, it requires the full-fledged 3 brachos, Birchas Hamazon. As we mentioned earlier. No, bracha achas mein shalish. Bracha achas, he only makes one bracha mein shalish. On a date or a fig, he would make ala eitz v'preitz. On a grain food, he would make ala mechia. Continues the Gemara. Kol she'ein loy min shivas haminim v'loy min dagan. If something is neither of the shivas haminim or a grain, it's none of the above. Ki going pas oirez v'doichen, bread made of oirez v'doichen, rice or millet. What is the halacha there? Rabbi Gamliel Omer, bracha achas mein shalish. It gets bumped down a level. According to Rabbi Gamliel, instead of reciting the entire Birchas Hamazon, He'll make a bracha achas men shalosh, he'll make a ala michya. It also gets bumped down a level. Instead of ala michya, being that it's only oiris v'doichen, which is a lower level grain, v'loi klum, he doesn't make any of that, but merely a burn nefashis. So you see clearly that Rabbi Gamliel holds that by oiris v'doichen, the proper bracha following eating rice is an ala michya. So this concurs with our former assumption that the brisa, which tells us that after oiris, one who makes ala michya is following the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel. Okay, so far so good. Says the Gemara, but this won't work out. But Mayo Kimta, how have you established that brisa? Who's the author of that brisa, which tells us that after oiris one makes ala michya? Rabbi Gamliel. You've connected it to Rabbi Gamliel. Okay, let's take a look at the latter part of the brisa. Ema seifa. Ema seifa the reisha. The second part of the reisha says as follows: when one goes ahead and cooks the bread, if one takes bread made of chitim, of wheat, cooks it up, and we have pieces in this dish, says the brisa, if the pieces are not kayam, they're not firm anymore, they disintegrate in your hands, says the brisa, what is the proper bracha? They don't have the status of bread anymore, even though it began as wheat bread, but nevertheless, since it disintegrated into the dish through the cooking process, so the proper bracha is bari min mezainis. Ulbasoif afterwards, bracha achas men shalish. He makes ala michya. Says the Gemara, let's analyze this. Can this be following according to the shita of Gamliel? This can't be. Mani, who is this? Gamliel. If we suggest that this shita, the author of this brisa and this halacha, which tells us that wheat bread that was cooked requires merely a mezainis and ala michya, it can't be Gamliel. Why? Because if Gamliel tells us that even on dates or porridge, oatmeal, what bracha does one say on that? Gimel brachos, brachos hamazon. That is the shita Gamliel mentioned earlier. So how can you suggest that real bread, it was real bread that was cooked, it would go down to mezainis and ala michya? It's inconceivable. You can't say that. Let's see inside. Gamliel, we follow the shita Gamliel. If we find that on dates and dice of cereal, Gamliel tells us Gimel brachos, he recites a full-fledged 3 brachos, brachos hamazon, following these items. If so, when we have real bread, which had the real status of bread, the real bread that was cooked, and the pieces are not really firm anymore, do you need to tell us that they require shalish brachos, they require brachos hamazon? Certainly, if cereal, if dates that were never even bread to begin with, require brachos hamazon, certainly something which was bread initially. So it cannot be that the author of this brisa is Rabbi Gamliel. So if so, a whole interpretation, a whole connection to Rabbi Gamliel falls away. Ela pshita rabbanon, you must say, it's evident, it's self-evident, that this brisa is the rabbanon, and the rabbanon indeed hold that bread that disintegrated requires merely a mezainis and ala michya. If so, back to square one. Yachai kash rabbanon. We have a stereo contradiction between 2 rabbanans. Let's go back to the kasha. This brisa told us that regarding oiris, something made of rice, what bracha do we recite? A mezainis beforehand, ala michya following. We have another brisa which tells us a mezainis beforehand and burn nefashis following. We have a contradiction, and they're both the rabbanon. Says the Gemara, Rabbanon, certainly the first brisa is also the Rabbanon. What about the contradiction? What about the fact that the brisa tells us that for oiris one makes ala michya, and this is a direct contradiction to the second brisa which tells us that for oiris one recites merely burn nefashos? We must amend the brisa, utni gabi oiris. Let's amend the brisa that by rice, ulbasoif in a v'rachol klum. For rice, the bracha following eating of rice is v'lei klum. It's not the above, it's not brachos hamazon, it's not ala michya, but rather burn nefashos. So in conclusion, there's no contradiction. Both brises are following the shita of the Rabbanon. And indeed the Rabbanon hold that the proper bracha for rice beforehand is mezainos, and afterwards is burn nefashos. So again, a summary and conclusion of the 4 shitas regarding rice. We have on top Rabbi Yochanan Manuri, who tells us that a rice, oiris, is a dagan, a grain like all other. He's chayev if it's chametz on Pesach. He fulfills his mitzvah of matzah. And regarding a bracha as well, we make a hamoitzi lechem and haaretz on bread which is made of oiras of rice, and following we make a birchas hamazon. We have the shita of Rabbi Gamliel. Before one eats oiras, one makes a bari mina mezainis. Following, he only makes a alamichya, since it is not on the same level as the chamesh min dagan. Therefore, unlike the chamesh min dagan, which require a birchas hamazon, Rabbi Gamliel says even on a cereal made of the fine grains, he makes a birchas hamazon. However, on a cereal made of oiras, on a bread made of oiras, he merely says an alamichya. According to the Rabbanan, before we make a mezainis, and following that we make a bar nefashis, and indeed that is our practice minhag today. And finally, according to Rabbi Shmuel, who refuted, their hashita was that oiras is so insignificant. Beforehand he makes a shahaka, and following oiras, he merely makes a bar nefashis. Continues the Gemara, Omar Rav, Hai riyata de chakloi, this dish, this mixture of the villagers, Rashi explains, we're speaking about the chavetz kedera, mentioned earlier in the Gemara. It's a dish made of grain, crushed grain, with honey and oil. So it depends where it was made. Depends what type of recipe they followed. Hayriyata de chakloi, if it's the villagers' recipe, the mafshi by kimcha, which contains lots of flour, lots of grain, mevorech, barim mezainis, the proper brachos mezainis. My taima, the smida ikar, because the flour is primary. The mechayza, but the riyata, this dish that's made by the city dwellers, they don't put in a lot of the grain, a lot of the flour. In that case, mevarach alav shakal b'dvarai, the proper bracha shakal. My taima, why? Duv sheikar, because in that case the primary ingredient is the honey, and therefore we recite shakal. Then Rava changed and he said as follows: in both cases, regardless of the proportion, regardless how much flour there is in there, how much honey there is in this riyata, nevertheless we recite a bari min mezainis in accordance with the shita Rabbi Shmuel taught us. The Rabbi Shmuel Damar Tavayu, they taught us kol sheyesh boy mechameshes haminim mevarchen olav bari min mezainis, any dish that contains even a small amount of the 5 grains, the chamesh haminim are so chashuv, so significant, that the entire dish assumes the status of the small amount of dagan that's mixed in there, and the proper bracha is very minimum. Continues the Gemara Rav Yosef. Hachavitza. This is a cooked dish made of pieces of bread. This is perurin kezayis. It has pieces of bread the size of a kezayis. Therefore, it is significant. It is chashiv. It doesn't become nullified, and retains its status of bread. And we make the proper bracha like we make on bread. Betchila mevarach alav hamoitz lechem and haaretz. And afterwards, mevarach alav shalish brachos. We make a full-fledged birchas hamazon. However, if the pieces are so small, the less perurin kezayis. If the pieces are smaller than a kezayis, in that case, it loses its status of lechem, of bread, and it is really considered to be a dish made of grain. And betchila mevarach alav barim mezainis. He makes a mezainis. L'basayf afterwards, brachachas men shalish. He recites the alamichi. How do I know that the sheer kezayis is the determinant factor? When it has a kezayis, it's chashav like lechem. If it's less than a kezayis, it's merely considered to be a mezayis. This sanya, as we learned. If the Yid, the Yisrael, approaches the Beis Hamikdash, he's standing there and he's offering a mincha. Rashi says, it's been a while since he's brought a mincha, therefore he's excited, he's happy. And on this occasion, what does he do? Omer, he makes the bracha of Baruch. Shechiyona v'kimona v'giyona l'zman. Hashem blessed who prolonged our life, mekayim us, sustained us, and allowed us to come to this special day. Taisa says that the Gemara is referring to the Kohen. The Kohen is the one that makes this bracha. Since the Kohen's opportunity to be makriv karbanos is very rare. He comes to the Beis Hamikdash and he's makriv only twice a year. Since we know there are 24 groups, 24 mishmaros, so he comes about twice a year. Each mishmar is a week, and therefore the bracha of Shechiyanu is in place. So either way, either the Yisrael who's offering the mincha, according to Rashi, either the Kohen who's being makriv the mincha, he makes the bracha of Shechiyanu. Continues the brayso. Not on la'achlan. he goes ahead and he's about to eat the mincha, mevarach hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. The proper bracha is hamoitzi. Now, how large are the pieces of the mincha? We know that there's a halacha called psisa. One is meant to break up the mincha into small pieces prior to doing the kmitza. The kmitza is when the kohen inserts his fingers into the mincha and scoops out a kaimetz, a portion, to be makav on the mizbeach. Before he does that, we are required to break up the mincha into pieces. How large are these pieces? V'taniel, we learned in the brayso, v'kulon, all the minchas, poison kezayis. The pieces are as large as of a kezayis. They are the size of a kezayis. So apparently, even when something is merely the size of a kezayis, and a mincha was cooked, or it was actually fried, so in that case we see that even though it was fried, it doesn't lose the status of bread. Why? On account of the fact that the pieces are a kezayis, and therefore they retain their status of lechem, and he makes hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. Says Rabbi Yosef, this is my proof, this is my raya, that even when bread is cooked or fried, nevertheless, it retains its status of bread when the pieces are as large as a kezayis. Amar Abaye, so Abaye challenged Rabbi Yosef. It's true, this brisa, perhaps, you can interpret that the pieces are large, the size of a kezayis. But remember, there's another shita, a shita of Rabbi Shmuel, Tanei Rabbi Shmuel, that hold that pesisa, the halacha of piecing up the mincha, breaking into pieces, are done in the following manner. One crushes it, and is machzal sultan. He crushes it, disintegrates it into small little pieces, much less than a kezayis. What are you going to say according to that shita? How is this going to work according to Tanei Rabbi Shmuel? The Omar, Parchan, he disintegrates it, he crushes it, he crushes up the mincha until he brings it back to a flour form. According to him, Achinami, will you say that hamoitzi is not required since they're very small pieces? If you're going to say, okay, you're right, according to this shita, there's no hamoitzi. Va'atanya, haven't we learned in the brayso? Lokat mikulan kezayis. If one gathers together the pieces of this mincha, and he gathers together and he has a total of a kezayis, so apparently we're speaking about little pieces that are less than a kezayis. The Brayso says, if he gathers together many pieces, and the total volume is a kezayis, va'achlan, and eats it, im chametzu, anish karis, on Pesach, if it's chametz, he gets karis, im matzu, if we're speaking about matzah, he's gathering together pieces of matzah, Pesach, he fulfills the obligation of eating matzah on Pesach. We see clearly that even small pieces, even minute pieces, less than a kezayis, have the status of lechem. Like Rashi says, matzah is required to be lechem oini, poor man's bread. So apparently, we see not like Rabbi Yosef. Abaye is challenging Rabbi Yosef. We see even smaller pieces, even menachos, that were fried, and the pieces were smaller than a kezayis. Nevertheless, they still have the halacha, they still have the status of bread, and one can fulfill his obligation of eating matzah on Pesach. So again, Abaye says, according to Rabbi Shmuel, that a mincha was crushed into small pieces. Nevertheless, the brayso tells us, if he takes those small fried pieces and he gathers them together to the amount of a kezayis, he can be yotzei of matzah. Apparently, has a din lechem, even when it's very small. Says the Gemara, this brayso tells us that gathering together pieces in the total amount of a kezayis constitute lechem is speaking about a unique case. Bishar Urson, he went ahead and made from it a new dough. He made it into a new dough, and he went ahead and formed it into a new bread. In that case, since he made it into a dough and baked it again, now it assumes the status of lechem. Beforehand, certainly not. Since it becomes nullified, they were fried, they were teeny, but if he goes ahead and he forms it into a new dough and bakes it again, that is what the brayso means when the brayso says he can fulfill his obligation of matzah. Ihachi, says the Gemara, if that's the case, let's take a look at the latter part of the brayso. When do we say that he can fulfill his obligation of achilas matzah? If he eats them, b'chdei achilas pras. Allah b'achilas pras is as follows. If one eats a shear of a kezayis, the size of an olive, within the time frame that one can eat, a half of a loaf that is 8 beitzim big, so we're speaking about an amount of 8 beitzim, that is considered a sheer suda. That is considered to be a sheer, an amount of time that any time within that time period, the achila is mitzdaref as one. Meaning, if one eats a kazayis, an amount of an olive, within the time frame that it takes for a person to eat 4 beitzim, he eats a little bit now, a little bit later, and in total, he ate the entire kazayis within the time frame that is required to eat 4 beitzim, it's considered to be one achila. It is mitzdaref, combines into one act, into one ma'aseh achila. Apparently, the half of the bread, this shear of 4 beitzim, is considered to be like a suda. It's one sitting, it's one achila, and it combines, it's mitzdaref, whatever is eaten within that time frame, to be considered to be one achila. So the Brisa tells us, when is he yotzei, the mitzvah of matzah, when he eats these pieces within this time frame of achila as pras, of the half a loaf. Says the Gemara, let's just dwell on the terminology and phraseology. Why does the Mishnah say, Vusha achlan, he ate them, b'chtei achilas pras? V'ibisha our son, if we're speaking about, he takes all these pieces and he formed it into a dough and he baked it into a bread. Haisha achlan. We have a question with the phraseology. The Brisa says, Vusha achlan. It's a plural term. He ate them, he ate the pieces. We're not talking about pieces anymore. We're speaking about that he combined them into one piece of bread. Vusha achlan. Vusha achlan mebayle. The Brisa should use a singular term. He ate it. He ate this bread. So the terminology, the phraseology of the Brisa apparently is indicative of one who is merely eating pieces. And then we go back and we ask the question of Yosef. Apparently, even little pieces of fried mincha that are less than a kazayis still have the status of lechem, and it can be yotzei achilas matzah. So we have a question of Yosef. Says the Gemara, Chamayaskinan, Rav Yosef will answer the following answer. The circumstance here is be'va melechem gadol. When these pieces are coming from a lechem gadol, meaning there's still a remaining large portion of lechem that these are broken off from. And therefore it's interesting, svara, since we still have the remaining of the lechem, the remainder of the lechem gadol is still intact, so even these little pieces that are less than a kazayis still have a chashivas. They have a significance. They are related, they are attributed to the lechem gadol, and in this case, even when they're less than a kazayis, they still retain their status of lechem, and one indeed recites hamoitzi, and Brachos hamazayin, and it can be yotzei mitzvahs matzah. However, just merely little pieces of bread that are not related to their host, there's no lechem gadol remaining, they're not coming from anything that is significant, everything is broken up into pieces. In that case, the determinant is whether they're the size of kazayis or not. Concludes the Gemara, my havi Allah. What is the outcome? What is the halacha regarding cooked pieces of bread? Amar Sheshes, Hay chavitza, afal gavles bepurin kazayis. Even if the pieces are smaller than a kazayis, mavarchol of amoitzi lechem na'oretz, the proper brachas hamoitzi. They don't lose their status. Amar Rava, fu the ikal la terisa danahama. Provided that they still retain the form, they still look like bread. So even if they're smaller than kazayis, if they still have the form of bread, the appearance of bread, then we make a hamoitzi. So in summary, a chavitza, a cooked dish that contains small pieces of bread, do we make hamoitzi? Says Rav Yosef, it depends. If the piece of bread is the size of a kazayis, then we make hamoitzi. Says Rava, the size is irrelevant. The determinant factor is whether it retained its sursapas, its appearance of bread. But if it lost its appearance of bread, then we do not make hamoitzi. Taisus tells us that the custom of Rabbeinu David Mimitz was that he used to soak his pieces of bread in water overnight. In the morning, when the water was whitened by the bread, which was indicative of the bread having lost its sursapas, he would go ahead and quickly eat this bread without hamoitzi and Brachos hamazayin, so that he could strengthen himself and go out to the shear without any delay. Continues the Gemara. The Gemara here will discuss the mitzvah of challah, the chiyuv of challah, to remove a piece of dough and give it to the kohen. Now, mitzvah challah applies to lechem, to bread. Lechem usually contains 3 basic elements. Number 1, the dough is usually of a thicker consistency. Number 2, it's baked in an oven. And number 3, the final product has a tzuras hapas, has an appearance of bread. What if bread is lacking, is deficient in any or all of these elements? Is there a mitzvah of challah? Says the Gemara, truknin chayavim b'challah. The Gemara soon will explain what exactly this is. There is a chiyuv challah on truknin. V'chiyasa rabin. Rav Yochanan, no. Truknin p'tur min challah. It is exempt from challah. What is truknin? Amar Abaye kubadar, a hole in the ground, a hole in the bottom of the oven, where they used to pour a loose batter into there. So it began with a loose batter, unlike ordinary dough, but once they poured it in, it baked into a tzuras hapas, so the final product looks like bread. So the Shita says that it's patur min achala, holds that we look at the initial stage. Since it's a loose batter, unlike ordinary lechem, it's patur min achala. The Shita says that it's chayiv b'chala, says we look at the final product. Since it has a tzuras hapas in its final phase, it's chayiv b'chala. Continues the Gemara, Rabbi Teresa, Tumanachala. What is Teresa? My Teresa. We have three explanations. Ikad Amri Govel Mirtach, a scalded batter, a loose batter which was spilled on an oven. So it has both deficiencies. It starts off with a loose batter, and even the final product doesn't look like bread. It is a flat formed product, and therefore it is exempt from challah. Ikad Amri, some say it was Nahama Dahamdika, dough which is put on a spit and coated with egg and oil. That too doesn't really have the status of bread. Some say it was lechem osel lekutach, bread which was intended to be crumbled into a dip. As Rashi says, it wasn't baked in an oven, it was dried in the sun. Lechem osel lekutach patur min achala. V'atani, we have a brayz that tells us chayiv b'chala. Says the Gemara, how will we answer this contradiction? Hasam over there, the reason is as follows. Rabbi Yehuda, it depends. The final form, the final product will be indicative of whether this lechem osel lekutach has the din of lechem. If a son ka'oven, if he formed into rolls of bread, chayaven, then he indicates that he is intending on making this into lechem, and therefore it has a status of lechem and is chay b'chal. However, kilimudim, if it's merely formed into boards, flat boards, he'll take those boards and he's going to crumb into the kutach, then it doesn't have the status of bread, it's exempt from challah. So in conclusion, we have several types of doughs. We have kuba da'ara, where one takes a loose batter and spills it into the hole. So on the one hand, it's a loose batter, therefore it's unlike ordinary dough, therefore it's patur min achala. The shita that says that it's chayiv b'chala, since we look at the final product and it has a tzuras lechem. Regarding govel martach, taking loose batter and spilling it onto the oven, in that case, it's patur since it has both deficiencies. It's a loose batter, and also the final product doesn't look like bread. Some say, Nahamadandika is patur, since it's the dough which is coated with the eggs and the oil, doesn't have the status of bread. And finally, regarding lechem osel lekutach, we have a difference of whether the final product looks like lechem or not. If he shapes it like bread, then it has a din of bread. But if it's merely flat boards, then it is exempt from chiyuv challah.